Good evening and welcome to the November 7th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. A little bit of a different start to the agenda this evening. We have a new councillor, about to be new councillor, Kim Burden. So I'm going to ask our corporate officer, Mrs. Kiva Kelleher, to administer the oath of office.
Thank you, Mayor Lefebvre. I would now ask Councillor-elect Kim Burden to rise and say the oath of office.
I, John Kimberly Burden, do solemnly swear that I am qualified to hold the office of councillor for the City of Parksville for which I have been elected. I have not, by myself or any person, knowingly contravened the local government acts respecting vote buying or intimidation of elections to the office. I will faithfully perform the duties of my office and will not allow any private interest to influence my conduct in public matters. As required by the community charter, I will disclose any direct or indirect pecuniary interest I have in a matter, not participate in the discussion. Unquote in respect.
Welcome, and we're back to a full contingent. And remember, for the first few months, you get a little bit of leeway from the chair being new, but after that, no leeway. Okay. Second item is the adoption of the minutes of council meeting held October 17th. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. We need to have the adoption of the minutes of the council meeting held October 24th. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Salter. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. More minutes to be adopted. The minutes of the council meeting held November 2nd. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Powell. No comments. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And lastly, I need approval of the agenda of tonight's agenda, November the 7th. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Salter. Are there any errors or omissions? Any additions? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. We have two delegations this evening. The first delegation is Mr. Gerry Vanderwolf, and it's the request for a shared fence policy and reimbursement of fence costs. Mr. Vanderwolf, are you here? Please come to the microphone and make yourself at home. Turn on the little red, little black button and speak right into the microphone as close as you can, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and members of Council, and congratulations to Councillor Burden on your recent election. Yes, I'm here tonight to ask for consideration of a policy that would deal with fences where municipal lands abut private property. And I live on Parkview Place, and it's a cul-de-sac, and beside my property there is a walkway that leads out to Stanford, and Stanford runs behind my property. So there's a requirement to have a fence along the walkway to keep dogs from straying and people from looking in and wandering onto the property, and the same with the rear of the property. Some municipalities in some provinces have protocols laid out, bylaws and statutes. Some provinces have passed statutes typically called the Line Fences Act, and they set out the protocols for dealing with issues where there are disagreements on line fences, either between private property owners or public and private. And British Columbia has not passed that kind of legislation. So typically in British Columbia there aren't those types of bylaws, although some municipalities in BC have passed bylaws dealing with fencing protocols. So I'm suggesting that it's a disadvantage to property owners such as myself who abut municipal property. We can't negotiate with council except to do as I'm doing tonight, to come in on a piecemeal basis and negotiate a line fence. I have negotiated with the property owner on my other side for maintenance of fencing and hedging there quite successfully. And if there weren't the laneway, then the adjoining property owner on my other side and I would have negotiated a fence. We would have only needed one fence, but as there's a laneway, we each need a fence, and we each have to bear the full cost of erecting and maintaining that. I'm suggesting that there be a policy in place that would look at some kind of cost sharing when private property abuts municipal. And I've set out the costs. I did contact city staff before starting to replace the fences to start the process going of eventually asking for reimbursement. This summer I did replace both fences because they were threatening to fail, and the total cost is close to $20,000. So what I was suggesting for an equal sharing would be something a little less than $10,000 for the municipality for reimbursement. Now, of course, I've worked in other provinces, other jurisdictions, and seen policies where perhaps the municipality would say, well, we will agree to finance half of the least expensive kind of fence, a chain link fence, for instance, rather than a full board fence. There's all different manners of approaching the protocol. I'm just saying it's a disadvantage to private property owners when they abut municipal property, and you want to at least look at that. As a retired CAO and corporate officer, I don't want to sit here and ask for money for myself. I'm much more comfortable saying you should look at a policy and see whether that's something that the municipality thinks they should have in this municipality. And I'll just close by saying good fences make good neighbors. It's a mid-17th century proverb, and it's just as valid today as it was then. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. van der Wolf. Questions from members of council? Any questions? No questions? Okay, thank you very much. The next delegation we have is the Parksville Community and Conference Center. Mrs. Spruit and the executive. Are you alone, Margaret, or are you going to have somebody with you? And Irene, Mrs. Holland, come up to the microphone, please, and turn it on. You have a little more than 10 minutes, if needed.
Good evening. We're here to present our 2017 budget. I've come up with a little bit of a PowerPoint to sort of go over some points. So what I've done is I'm comparing the 2015 to where we're at for the third quarter for 2016. So as you can see, the 2015, 2016, there was a shortfall of $24,923.13. This was caused by a large group that canceled. They actually ended up getting free rental at one of the schools that was shut down. The other two was an entire facility rental. As you can see, our third quarter, we're projected for 2016 is $1,285.99, and we're sitting at $73.67 $671.50. Our projected for 2017 is $131,020.
Margaret, is that slide in this package that you gave us?
I did send it today. I don't know if you guys got it. So,
We didn't get it, no.
okay. Okay. I apologize. I did send it. So, yeah. Okay. What you have in front of you, well, up on the screen, is the 2016 rentals. What we have been doing is tracking them. So as you can see, the hours used are varying. The nonprofit use, that's how many nonprofit groups use our facility. For example, January, we had 396 hours. Nonprofit, we had 54 groups. Commercial, we had 8. That's up 100% compared to what we had for 2015. There are a couple of dips, of course. In March, we only had 272 hours. The nonprofit was 62. The commercial was 9, and we were down 29%. Overall, we're increasing as we go. October was a magnificent month for us. September is always a little bit hard because we're just starting back up. But we, sorry. Okay. So as you can see, August and July, that's usually our quiet time, but we had a lot of new bookings coming in. July, for example, we had 214, 30 were nonprofit, 5 were profit. That's up 25%. So these are new people that are coming to us. It's quite interesting. Other revenue, we did have a deficit of $11,225.10. These again are the ones that are hard to predict. We try to focus on what we had the year before. So we did come a little short on the catering, the equipment rental, the concession, special events, and set up and take down. A lot of these are variable, so it's hard to actually hit it with dead on. We have projected revenue of $55,365 in this area. We're sitting at $33,599.05. So we have backed it back down a little bit for 2017, trying to be a little bit more realistic, and we went $52,650. Expenses, we had 269,988. Our actual expenses for the year were $200,381.5103. The difference is the natural gas. We had a fairly mild year last year, so our gas bill was down. Maintenance, we didn't have a lot, so we actually were able to keep that back. And labor, what happened with labor was we had scheduled for another maintenance person, but we held back and tried to do it without it. But we're at the point now that we can no longer do that. So our expenses were for 2016 are $292,414, and we're sitting at $195,4281. And for 2017, we're projecting $295,602. So if we have extra money left, it is shared with a 50-50 split with the city. So the city received $6,986.50 back from the 2015 this year. We always try to cut expenses where possible. We cut some expense items, and we've cut some expense items in order of keeping the request of the city down. So we have gone through and we've really crunched this 2017. Hopefully we haven't crunched it too much, but we're going to give it a try. That's it for the PowerPoint.
So the questions we're going to have are from the package that you sent us
Okay?
for tonight. My questions come from what you sent us earlier.
Okay.
So members of council, does anyone have any questions for the delegation? Councillor Burton.
In reviewing the information that you sent to us, I've noted that the revenue targets, you outlined them there for 2015, but going back to 2014 as well, have not been met. And I'm wondering, and you're establishing a revenue target for this year that is. I'm curious to know how you're going to meet it, given where you're at in the third quarter.
We have implemented an increase in rate, so that is going to give you an extra 2% on the rentals we have. We are basically fully booked for November and December for weekends. We have, like I said, we're very, very booked. I'm confident we are going to meet our goal.
And is that an improvement over last year?
It is.
Okay.
Councillor, are you finished, Councillor Burton?
For
Any
now.
follow-up for now? Okay, Councillor Oates.
I have a couple of questions. They're just clarity on some discrepancies I think I saw in the document. So on, are you guys have the same document we got on page 18? Does that make sense to you? 18 of 104, is that what you have? No? You probably got a different document.
No. So which area are you looking at?
It's budget for ordinary income expense. We need to, yeah. Okay, so that one there is 18 and 104. That's the same document. We're looking at the same document?
Yes.
Okay, so the budget for 2017 for total income you have at $430,393.
Yes.
Okay, and on page 25 of 104, you have a budget of $435,371. Why are those numbers different?
I actually have, oh, wait. It's actually 104. The total I have on this page, page 21, is 433.93.
I'm sorry, page 25. I'm sorry. I referred you to the wrong page. Page 25. In the 5-year plan,
Yes?
the budget there listed for 2017 is $435,371, which is not the same as the budget that's for 2017 is detailed on page 18 of 104. It's like $5,000 difference or something.
So it could be an error.
Okay. Okay.
Weird. No, it's not.
And the other questions I had were specifics on the rentals of the rooms, but Councillor Burton captured the spirit of that in his questions. The budget and what we've actually targeted, what we've hit. Some of the numbers are only like, excuse me, at 50% or something of what we were estimating as revenues from those rentals. But I guess you've already answered that when you talked about the increase in rates. That's all I have for right now.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, thank you for your expenses. I have a few questions here. One is on page 20. You've listed a piano, but you've got no numbers there. I'm just not understanding why you have piano. Actually, it's twice. It's also on page 27. I'm not sure what that's for.
We do have a piano, and it was for piano maintenance, but we have, by the amount that it's used, it really doesn't make sense to budget something for the maintenance of it, but it is still an item.
Oh, so it's just maintenance for the piano. I see, okay. And then you've also got staff travel on page 26, and I'm wondering where are you going?
We go to trade shows, conferences. We go to meet customers.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. So on page 9, page, how many pages here? It's 19. Page 19 of our package, you've got $5,000 for legal, and that's never been in the budget before. Can you tell me why you have it now?
I do. We are just about to enter into negotiations for our union agreement, and we do need to seek legal counsel for it.
Okay. The $12,000 for advertising and promotion, could you speak to me more about what that is?
What that is advertising. For example, we advertise in wedding fairs, different brochures. We also do local on the radio, different things. Basically, it's marketing, trying to get our brand out there.
And the website maintenance, and so you've budgeted $2,000 and we've only spent $197.10. And so what maintenance would be involved?
The maintenance of the website is when we need an upgrade or things like that. It is a bit more now. We have done some since the third quarter. There has been more income spent there.
Have you updated the website?
We updated it last year, actually, so it's just a matter of maintenance and upgrading as we go.
And so when you had that report that was submitted, the consultant, it said that the website needed to be updated. Has it been updated since?
It has been, yes. And we did check to see where he was finding it on there, and we didn't, but we had somebody go through it and update everything.
Okay, thank you.
I have one observation to make, and it might be that they're in the wrong place. On page 28, at the very bottom of the page under capital projects, you've got dishes, and on page 21, at the bottom of the page for capital projects in 2017, you've got sound equipment. Is that a typo?
That is a typo. We need to use 2017 needs to be towards audio and sound. We need to do improvements there.
So the sound equipment is the right
is the correct
right
one.
Okay.
I apologize.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else got questions? I'm going to go back to Councillor Burden and then Councillors. Have you spoken yet? No, you haven't. I'm going to go to Councillor Patterson first, and I'll come back to Councillor Burden and Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for coming with your budget before us. So I have a couple quick questions first off before I ask questions in regards to it. Do you do the budget in-house at the centre?
Yes, we do.
What type of program do you use?
We use an Excel.
So I'll ask my questions in regards to the budget. So on page 18, and it just seems to seem like a trend and that where you have budgeted a certain amount in your rentals and the actuals are usually less. So in 2014, 2015, and depending on where you finish off in 2016, your budgeted amounts are higher than your actuals. So wouldn't it be prudent to forecast a lower budget rental rather than a higher, even if you're looking at having your rates increased?
What we do is we look at where we're at, and then we add a percentage to it, and that's how we do it. So basically what we were doing was, okay, 2016, the third quarter, we looked to see where we were at, and then we added our percentage to that. We do go through and take into account what we have showing on our books coming up. It is hard, really hard and difficult to nail it down exactly because, for example, last year we had a 3-month booking that canceled within the allotted time, so we lost that revenue.
And I understand that. I'm very familiar with budgets from sitting around this table and in my personal life, but I always allocate a certain amount for lost revenue or lost bookings, and that in my practice and everything too. And I'm just seeing a trend constantly that even that maybe should be looked at, that to decrease rather than increase your projected actual.
Councillor Burton and then Councillor Salter.
So my overall concern is with the ratio change of the amount of revenue that you've derived through rentals and the amount of revenue you derive from the city. When this project started, it was roughly a 50-50 split, and now I think we're looking at roughly a 70-30 split, with the city contributing 70% and the facility rentals contributing 30%. And then I'm looking at areas where you've cut expenses to compensate for revenue that unexpectedly has not arrived. You're cutting things like staff development. You're cutting repairs, which I believe will eventually contribute to higher capital costs. So, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm concerned about the fact that you are unable to meet targets consistently over the last 3 years. And I wonder how we're supposed to have faith in the fact that you're going to meet the targets that you set for the coming year.
Well, when I did make the cuts, I was very aware of what I was doing, and I have gone back and reviewed what we've spent on certain items, and I've said, okay, at the council's suggestion, I did say, okay, we're not utilizing that, so we are going to back it off. It is a projection. It is within our control. As far as the building maintenance goes, we are responsible for $5,000 of any kind of large major repair. So we've had a lot of different things come up over the years, and we've always managed to pay for large repairs, and never have we had to come to the council and ask for the money for them.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I just wanted to ask then, with regard to the audio on page 24, so you're forecasting 20,000 for 2017?
Yes.
Is that, and so then the 20,000 in 2015, although it says kitchen equipment, is that actually audio as well?
No, the 2015 was used towards kitchen equipment.
The 20,000. Okay, so there's just one. So it's just 20,000 that you're going to be utilizing in 2017 for audio.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Powell, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to Councillor Beale. She hasn't spoken yet. So Councillor Beale and then Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you very much for the information. I had a couple of questions. One, I'm curious, looking forward to 2017, do you have some regular rentals that have already indicated that they will be continuing into the coming year? And do you already have, or perhaps some new rentals as well for the coming year that you're aware of?
Yes, we have bookings. For example, Island Health is booked all the way into 2018. We have lots of new bookings. We actually have 5 weddings that have booked for 2017. There's lots of new bookings coming in, and it seems to be almost a waiting game for some. Like I said, for the weekends, it's really tight. For example, the SPCA wanted a date in October, a weekend. We can't give it to them. We're fully booked.
Thank you. That must be encouraging. And another question, at that first slide, the PowerPoint that you were showing, and it indicated our rental hours for different groups. I'm just curious, and it's bi-monthly for the month, right?
Yes.
What are the maximum number of potential hours available in a month, or do you have that information?
We could basically almost go 24 hours a day. We have for some groups, for example, when the Girl Guides did their, they call it a camp out weekend, they were here for 4 days, and we were here 24 hours for them. because they lock themselves in for 24 hours. So it's varying. We just never know quite what we're getting. If it's an entire facility booking, it's usually about 14 hours. So, and that doesn't necessarily mean that's the whole, it depends what they're booking. It could be they're just renting the seaside, and so we have them for 14 hours. Meanwhile, the Gerry Oaks and Arbutus, we have 2 groups, and it ends up being 8 hours in that room. So it all adds up in totals that way.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. On page 25, if you look at the income and you've got Seaside Hall rental, that's the big gymnasium room, is that correct?
Yes.
And then you've got the whole facility rentals, and if you look, those numbers are just about identical. How does that happen?
Because a lot of times the people will opt to just rent the seaside, and we rent out the seaside more than we do entire facilities. So, but our entire facilities is picking up, so it's a choice of the customer as to what they want.
And so you're budgeting $27,066 and $27,000 for one for the Seaside Hall rentals and the whole facility rentals, and $30,000 for the next year for both, $30,900 for the year after for both, $31,781 for both, $33,765 for both, $34,778 for both. Like, I'm not sure I understand how those two numbers are connected. Doesn't it cost more to rent the whole facility than it does just to rent the seaside?
It does, but as I just clarified, we actually get more rentals on the seaside than we do on the entire facility. So it actually, we generate more money with the seaside than we do an entire facility, just because people opt to not rent the entire facility. They only want to rent the seaside.
So wouldn't the numbers be different then?
No, it actually generates about the same revenue.
Any further questions from members of council? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not even going to refer to the page, I don't think, but one of the line items says that there's a net vending machine. Is there a vending machine at the community center?
There was a vending machine, but it didn't generate enough use. It was a cash machine, like a debit machine to get cash, but because it didn't generate enough constant revenue, it was a trial base that we had it on, and the company just couldn't see having it sitting there not being idle and not being utilized enough.
But it's still in your budget?
It is, but I have nothing on that list. So.
I'm sorry, on page 25, you've got $400, $416, $432, $449, all going forward into 2021. Oh.
Well, I'm not sure why I have that there, but I do know the vending machine has been pulled because the operator did come to me and say, I just can't keep it here.
Okay. But that'll be adjusted.
Yes.
So I just have one other quick question in regards to Appendix 3, your budget capital expenditures.
Okay.
And you have required items, and then in some of those, you have them budgeted out for years moving forward, and others that you don't. Is it just going to be sitting there for a wish list, per se?
No.
Okay. So the stage curtains is budgeted for?
We haven't picked a date yet for them. Actually, the stage curtains are a massive expense to coat them out. Okay. They're running about $70,000 to replace them.
Okay, so these are all required items?
Yeah, it is.
Or
They will be addressed, but what will happen with a lot of those bigger items, like the curtains, for example, is they'll be put over 3 or 4 years to accumulate the money to be able to pay for them.
But wouldn't you put that into the budget if you're doing a 5-year budget plan?
Right now, what we're doing is we're addressing the needs that we need immediately.
Okay.
As you said, it's sort of a wish list. I basically went to all the staff and said, what needs to be addressed, and that's what went on the list.
So then just my final question is, why wouldn't you total that at the bottom? of the total expenditures so that you knew what your numbers would look like?
I could do that. For example, the flooring, the 2018 and 19, I had it scheduled for the flooring for the seaside, and with the cooperation of the city and the grant that we applied for, it actually can be done next year. And it's not going to cost anybody anything, so that money can be relocated.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments? I think we've asked quite a few questions. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to make a motion to table the report for further discussion at a later date.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Beal. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll get back to you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consideration of a development variance permanent development permit for mixed-use commercial use 171 Jensen Avenue. I'm not going to call for a mover and a seconder, and I know that we've received. I'm going to go to the Director of Planning for a moment to get the number of comments we've received. This can be fairly informal because it's not a true blue. What do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? Public hearing. Public hearing. That's the word I'm looking for. So, and what I would ask you to do, though, is I think we've all read the emails that have come in. There's a great deal of repetition, so I would ask you, if you're going to repeat what the previous speaker has said, just make it a little shorter, or say that I want to just repeat what the previous speaker has shorter, as stated. So, from the audience, if you come up to the microphone, give us your name and your address, and we'll start with this gentleman coming up here, Mr. Reitzman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. First of all, congratulations to Councillor Burden. I know the thrill of being elected, and I also know the thrill of not being elected.
Well, you did fairly well, so
I'm really pleased for Councillor Burden, by the way. Just a couple of comments, if I may. Is the format, Mr. Mayor, that observations are made and there's an answer to observations, or is it just a matter of staff noting observations?
I would say that we'll note the observations.
So there's no interaction, or just give some observations?
I think if there's a definitive question, I mean, I have some questions. I don't know if I can ask them tonight, but anyway,
okay,
when the council deliberates at that point in time, probably.
I note your comment. It's not formal, actually. First of all, I'm not opposed to the development. Let me go from there. But there are some observations which I think should be, in my opinion, be considered. First of all, there is the quid pro quo. There are 5 variances. A variance generally is an aberration of what is in the OCP, and it generally is an upgrade to facilitate a request. And my point is, what is the quid pro quo for the city? What is the taxpayer? What are they benefiting from? I know the developer is benefiting from variances, and that's fine. I have no objection to that. But what's in it for the taxpayer of Parksville in order to give those variances to come up with the project which needed variances? Now, is there a traffic pattern, commercial as well as residential, study done for the city of Parksville? If so, does it jive with that particular study? If not, is a traffic pattern study in the offing? Because we have a lot of parking problems. As you know, there are 2 churches. There's SOS and the Legion as well. There's a chronic shortage of parking. As you might know, SOS is often parking at the Legion. Second point, SOS and the Legion, have they been consulted? Have they been involved in terms of their input for this particular project? Thirdly, do I understand there's underground parking? And do I understand there's no loading zone or a ramp? And the fourth one is, I understand there are 23 parking spaces. There are 19 residential units. Generally, it's probably 1.3, 1.4 cars per unit. That leaves 4 parking spaces for guests, never mind about parking spaces for any particular commercial undertaking. And last but not least, I'll be leaving immediately after this because I have choir. But having said so, we do have 2 concerts, November the 20th and December the 11th, our Christmas one. So those are some of the observations, and I wonder if at this time, is it appropriate to ask for an answer, or is it just going to be noted and part of the deliberations by council?
I'm positive that during council deliberation, I took down all your notes, and a lot of them are questions that I have. So I think we'd better move on with the comments, and when the council deliberates, this will all come out.
That's all. Thank you very much. And again, I'm not opposed per se on the whole with the development, but there are some concerns, and the quid pro quo for me is very important because there are 5 variances.
Thank you.
And again, no disrespect to council, but I have to leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Pastors, come on down.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Congratulations, Kim. In looking at this and seeing the drawings of it all, I have a couple of concerns. In particular, the sight lines that are involved on the Jensen Street crosswalk, the pedestrian crosswalk. And the minute that you have a building that's going to be at 0 setback on Jensen, it's going to really cut down on the view that people are going to have trying to cross Jensen. At, say, coming from SOS or somewhere along that pathway there, it cuts it back by 15 degrees. It's going to make it very dangerous. And because the variance is asking for no loading zone, I can foresee that you're going to have a truck doing some kind of delivery, and it's going to be parked on Jensen with cones. And the minute that happens, as you're coming along from the Alberni Highway up Jensen, you're going to go past this truck and you're going to be right on top of the crosswalk. And if there's somebody in that crosswalk, you're going to have a lawsuit. It's going to be very dangerous. It's just a bad thing to do. If you're turning the building and the lot around, that the lot is now back to front, well, hey, the setback is 4 meters. So let's have the building set back 4 meters from Jensen. You've accomplished it. You turn the lot around back to front, just like the developer wants, except you've now imposed that 4-meter setback. There's nothing wrong with that. Cities like Calgary and whatnot, when they put out buildings downtown, they don't allow a 0 setback anymore. They turn around and they insist that you have a front plaza area, which opens up the street. If you had a setback of 4 meters, you wouldn't be cutting out the sight lines for that pedestrian crosswalk. I won't even go into the making a back lane a street. There's other people that probably will talk about that. But I just think that having that curve, that Jensen curve in there, and a crosswalk in it, and having this building up there is going to really cause some bad problems. And I would suggest very strongly that there be a full traffic study of that whole corner in there. And that is from, say, the Royal Bank to the SOS and out to the fire hall, that triangle. And if the traffic study hasn't been done, I would suggest that because of this development and the additional residents that are going to be in there and the additional traffic from the people that are going to be living there, that the developer pay for that traffic study or good portion of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, up. Name and address, please.
Michael Jensen, 1266 Jukes Place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a 16-year member of the Parksville branch of the Royal Canadian Legion, this project and application caught my eye. I attended the October 17th council meeting to learn a little bit more. Having listened to opening comments by council members, visiting the area 3 times, and consulting with several city residents, I make the following recommendations as a private citizen. This variance permit, as presented, should not be approved. Second, the block must be provided with a laneway that includes at least 2 entrances/exits designed to accommodate tractor-trailer delivery vehicles. Any termination of the existing lane to Alberni Highway shall be right in or right turn out. A concrete center divider needs to be installed on Alberni Highway on the north side of the intersection with Jensen. Thirdly, these and other recommendations should be acted on before any further development applications or revised applications are processed for properties in this block.
Could I ask you, the concrete divider on Jensen?
A concrete divider on Alberni.
Alberni, I'm sorry, okay.
Downhill from Jensen. The following material is background to my recommendations. I am aware that at least 2 other housing projects in this block moved beyond the conceptual stage. None to date have moved much further. Having examined the traffic and parking situation in the block, it is understandable. Could it be because having to use a poorly designed back lane for primary access to properties is the reason? All the discussion about developing this block includes increased vehicular traffic, and most of that increase would have to use the back lane. That back lane has only 1 public entrance/exit. To top it off, that entrance effectively creates an intersection less than 135 feet from the Jensen-Alberni controlled intersection. A quick read of road standards seems to indicate that intersections, depending on road category, should be no closer than 150 to 250 feet apart. We have seen vehicles turning left out of the lane to the northbound Alberni Highway and left from the highway to the lane. We have seen vehicles turning right from Jensen, dart across the southbound left turn in order to drive into the lane. Strangely, unlike many other intersections, the Alberni Highway does not have double solid yellow center lines to prohibit left turns. Therefore, I find it curious that the city seems to want to facilitate this project in the face of numerous challenging and maybe dangerous conditions on this laneway that must serve at least 3 of what I call orphaned properties. To avoid making bad or dangerous turns at the only exit from the back lane to the Alberni Highway, vehicles have been observed shortcutting to Hearst by using the Legion or Church and the Rod and Gun private parking lots. I trust Council will give strong consideration to the foregoing. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's our next speaker? I'm going to ask Mrs. Hoffer, please.
Good evening, Council. I use this McMillan, Jensen, ever since the ring road went in. And it is a tricky place now. I believe that the variances, particularly two of them, the zero, basically 0.59 on Jensen, and particularly the loading zone, the lack of loading zone is very bad. The variance to remove the loading space is very dangerous. I worked in downtown Parksville for 20 years, and like Councillor Patterson, watched the near misses and the small accidents caused by not having a loading zone. It is really unbelievable how many that occur. I heard in the council meeting that the variance for needing loading space was just above the threshold of not needing a loading zone. Actually, it's 10% over the limit, and the exemption in the zoning bylaw is very generous now, extremely generous, at 2,000 square meters, I believe. Yes. That is, you can build 21,780 square feet without a loading zone. And that is just under half an acre. And the commercial that is suggested here is over half an acre. I live on a half-acre lot. It's a huge amount of space. That brings me to the next thing. So you have this busy area, you have this huge commercial use. You can say it's offices. I worked in the office for 20 years. We had deliveries all the time. They were usually an envelope, but the envelope comes in a big truck. It doesn't come in a little car. So in this very busy area around the SOS, where there's no place to park now, we're going to have this large truck just parking in the laneway to run into an envelope into an office, if that's what it is. The developer could put in a loading zone by making the commercial property just 2,100 square feet smaller, and you wouldn't need a variance. Or could make the whole commercial property smaller enough to provide space for the loading zone. This modification would even have less feet. There are only, as Mr. Restman said before, there are only 4 parking spaces after you take out the residential. 4 for over a half acre of commercial. In my opinion, all the variances are dangerous, and although these variances are requested, the developer is offering nothing in return. The footprint of this building is just too large, and that's why the variances are being asked. Now, I have a couple of other things I'd like to mention. If you want the public to become involved in this kind of very important, because it does affect all of us. It doesn't just affect the downtown. We need to have notification. There's not many strange people like me that read all these things or watch you at home every time you have a council meeting, because I'm lucky enough to go and see you on the video. By the way, you all look nice too. I think that this you people decided on the 17th to carry this forward. There was no posting until the Friday, October 28th, that there was even going to be this meeting. That's number one. And number two, it was only posted on the web, and most people like me are different. I read Parksville's web. I think that we need to have more involvement of people. And the last thing I'd like to say to you is that as far as monetary gain for the city, I heard that the concept for this is that we will get better taxes. Paraphrasing an old saying, I would like to say approving these variants would be getting short-term gain, being the taxes right now, for long-term pain. And that is what we are getting, because we will be paying for all of the off-site development that will occur. From my 10 years serving on the Advisory Planning Commission for Parksville, I am aware that it is before the variants are given by council that the cost of off-site work and the share of costs is decided. I don't know why, when we know that there's, according to everyone, that there needs to be something done to the pedestrian walkway at least, if not other things, why we don't have these costs of what can be done, and why the developer is not paying for it, because that is the way it normally works. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Humper. Who's next? Mr. O'Brien, your name and your full name and your address, please.
You bet. Good evening, Council. I am Doug O'Brien, 1456 Seaway Drive in Parksville. After reading Mr. Russell's reports and reviewing the plans, I'm just here to offer my full support for the variance as applied, as well as my full support for the development permit when it comes up. I believe that this building and this development will be an asset to our community, and I'm looking forward to it being built. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the audience? Yes, can I ask you, I'll get somebody from the very back and I'll take you next. Better hand up first. Mrs. Sutherland, before you speak, were you consulted on this as the SOS? You were not? Okay. Thank you.
So
name and address, please.
Sure. Renata Sutherland, 609 Willow Street in Parksville, also Executive Director of the SOS. So as the SOS, when we became aware of this, certainly one of our biggest concerns, as others have said, is the traffic flow in that laneway. It is already what we consider precarious at times. Yes, our parking lot is very busy, as is at times the church, the Legion, and the Rod and Gun. Many people use our parking lot as a drive-through, and with people coming and going, it does become very congested, and others do, as someone else has said, tend to slip through the church parking lot, the Legion parking lot, or even the Rod and Gun parking lot. I think adding the possibility of 23 more vehicles in that laneway would be extremely dangerous, as would the crosswalk that's on Jensen Street that would become right beside this new property would be a huge concern. Already I've seen staff, volunteers, and members of the general public that have been in that crosswalk, and cars don't always see them as they come around the corner from Jensen onto McMillan. So I do ask you that you look very closely at traffic patterns and ensure that we're looking after the safety of all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, you're next. Name and address, please.
My name is Harry Griffith, and I'm from the church on Hearst Avenue. I agree with most of the people that are made their comments here. That laneway is a fire lane, and could you see a 18-wheeler backing out of that fire lane to get out onto the highway again? I think you should be looking seriously at the traffic flow, like the rest of the people said. And the church wasn't notified about this project. And that's about all I have to do. Oh, one other question. How did commercial residents go into from residential to commercial on that property?
The bottom floor would be commercial. The top 3 floors would be residential. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I don't. You got 2 houses on that property right now, so it's residential, right?
Yeah.
So how did it go to commercial?
They're looking for rezoning, I guess. Is there rezoning involved? No, there's no rezoning involved. It's acceptable for zoning for that type of building.
Oh, okay. Previously.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comments from members of the audience? Mrs. Hodges. Was the Legion pre-notified?
No.
No, thank you. Okay. I know your name, Sue Hodges. I need your address.
201 Cypress.
Thank you.
As a Legion member, I'm very concerned. I have talked to Kim about this. There isn't enough roadway there to go back and forth. We have a lot of cars crossing our driveway constantly, which makes it very dangerous for cars backing out of the church and cars backing out of the Legion. I think it's a good idea. I think it's nice to develop property. I don't have an issue with that. But you need more room. And there is another piece of property there that could maybe be put together with it. I'm not trying to make a commission here. But you do need loading. You do need a space for that no matter what. You need garbage pickup. I didn't hear that mentioned. The fire trucks, they have to be able to go back and forth. If there's a truck backed into that property, there goes the SOS. We need more room, and I would hope the council would give more thought to the traffic. Also, we have a lot of people in the little carts, and they come across that road. They're not going very fast, and some of the cars whipping around the corner. It's very dangerous. That's my thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Your Worship, could I ask Mrs. Hodges a question? Your Worship?
Pardon me?
Can I ask Mrs. Hodges a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. In the past, there was some conversation about expanding the Legion. Is that still in the background?
Not really.
Not really?
No. It's very expensive. And,
obviously.
Yeah. And there is a lot of other buildings going up too. Like we were under the impression there was an apartment going up on Corfield there for seniors. So that would kind of take away from us. You have to have enough room for everybody.
Yes. Thank you.
So, thanks.
Any further questions from members of the audience before we move on? Okay, seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations that you have in your report. Do I have a mover and a seconder? No mover and no seconder? So what do we do? You're moving it? Pardon me? You'd like to make a motion? Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would like to make a motion at this time, because of all of the input that we've heard, and I believe most of us have probably already been up Jensen, also in the laneway, recognize the difficulties with regard to the variances. I'd like to make a motion that we have a traffic study completed with regard to the building and Jensen, and also that laneway, because that laneway cannot possibly meet requirements for the additional traffic.
Let's make a motion. Let's not. I know what you're trying to say. So you want a traffic study done?
I do.
Anything else?
I would like to review the variances as well, because I think several of these variances are outside of our OCP. But that could be two motions.
I'm a seconder for that motion. Seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering if we should ask that the traffic study or the traffic pattern be paid for by the proponent as part of the motion.
I would support that.
Mr. Russell, that's a reasonable request in this instance?
If I may, Your Worship, it is an unusual request as part of a variance request, but if the applicant is willing, they certainly, it's entirely at their discretion whether they're prepared to provide it as part of this proceeding.
So I gather a traffic study hasn't been done.
If I may, Your Worship, the zoning is already in place on the property, so it already has development rights. So this is really this is a case where tomorrow someone could come in with a development permit without the relaxations, and they would have the right to develop that property in accordance with the density that it describes, which is a 3-story building. So in light of that, a traffic study was not a requirement, and it's not typically a requirement of a variance proceeding. As I said, if council wishes to request that the applicant furnish one as part of a revised application, that's certainly possible.
Okay. Councillor Oates?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that doing a traffic study might be something that we need to have done, but there was an awful lot of things that were raised here tonight, and I'm really uncomfortable supporting any motion to grant any variances until we've had some response to the very different concerns that have come before us. I think that I would be a lot more comfortable if I had staff's response to some of the concerns that were brought forward here tonight, and one of those might be a response to the requirement as a traffic study. And Mr. Russell's already explained why it wasn't a requirement at this point. But I think there's been some very legitimate concerns that have been raised here tonight, and before I would not be able to support the variance tonight until those concerns have been at least replied to. I tried to keep track of all of them. I gave up writing, but I know that we're being recorded, so I respectfully would suggest that we ask for a report based on the comments that we've heard from the public here tonight, and do it right.
Mrs. Gomez?
Your Worship, in light of Council's comments, I could suggest that Council refer the development variance report back to staff to address the questions raised tonight and bring it forward to another meeting of Council.
Would that satisfy you, Councillor Salter?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'll move a referral.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Burton. We have a motion on the floor.
No, motion to refer is always in order. Motion to refer is always in order.
Oh, that's true. Okay, so we have a motion to refer.
And there's no debate.
All right. And you're referring it exactly as the comments as per Mrs. Gomez. Okay. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Oh, opposed. Anybody opposed? Are you opposed, Councillor Patterson?
I had further questions, so this table's all questions. And
so your questions will be answered by the study that will be done?
I doubt it.
Councillor Patterson, give her questions now, Mrs. Gomez.
Once the motion to revert is voted on, it's complete.
Okay. All right. So Thank you very much, members of the audience, for your comments. That was very insightful and gives us a lot of food for thought. Okay, the next report I have is the, pardon me? Oh, my goodness. Everybody's leaving. Okay. Next report I have is from the Corfield Street Upgrade and Associated Works Open House Feedback Results, file number 533020, Corfield. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Burton. Okay, so Mr. Figuera, would you please give us the background on this particular item?
If I may, Your Worship, before Council is a report to follow up on the Resolution 16-064 carried in the March 21st, 2016 Council meeting. In that meeting, staff were asked to bring back to Council the results of the Corfield Street Upgrade and Associated Works Public Open House, so that Council may gauge the public support for the Jensen Greenway, which is the multi-use trail in the Jensen Avenue corridor between Corfield Street and McVickers. A summary of the public response to the project is attached to the report and is located on page 78 to 82 of the agenda. In summary, 80 attendees signed in at the open house, and a total of 67 attendees filled out the survey. And this is considered to be an excellent turnout for a project of this size. 88% of the respondents supported the Greenway. There were some issues that the public felt needed to be addressed, and I've paraphrased them as follows. There were a number of comments, but I tried to pick out some common themes. And one was consideration of lighting for the trail for security and safety reasons. The other was traffic calming concerns on Bagshaw and Corfield. Another one was additional measures at the intersection of Corfield and Jensen to address pedestrian and cyclist safety is needed. We also had tinted asphalt for the bike lanes was something that was requested. Crosswalk safety should be given significant effort is one of the comments, or a few of the comments. And there's concerns with mixing bike and pedestrian traffic. Staff have estimated that an additional $20,000 is required to address the issues raised by the public to complete the detailed design and tender document preparation for the Jensen Greenway. Additional funding is available in the gas tax fund, and the recommendations are as per the report.
Any questions for Mr. Figuera? Pretty straightforward. I attended the open house myself. It was a pretty popular item. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. The next item we have is the 2016 Budget Variance Report. Mr. Butterworth, I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Salter. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Butterworth.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So this is the presentation for to September 30th of how we're doing against our budgeted revenues and expenditures. So we've covered that. And the information, so the information presented here is in the agenda. It's been provided to Council and is part of the agenda on, I think it starts on page 85, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around page 85. So tonight what I'll be covering here is we'll go through the general revenue fund. That's where the majority of the stuff happens. We'll review our major revenues. We'll review the departmental operating expenditures, we'll review capital expenditures, and then the water and sewer funds are a little smaller, so we'll look at each of those in total, and we'll look at AWS, ERWS, we'll look at the PCTC and our DCC collections. So this is just a little graph just to show it graphically on our revenues. The major revenue that we have is taxes, and you might notice it's not on there. That's because it's over 12 million. It shrinks these other ones down to almost nothing when I put it on the graph. So I left it out. We'll cover that in a minute. This just shows the other ones, and so the red is our actuals. So as you can see there's a few columns there where we're far ahead of where our budget is. Our budgets are in blue. Property tax, penalties, and interest, we're a little behind now. Our second penalty, tax penalties came in at the end of, or in October, first week of October, so there's another 22,000 there, so that's almost up to budget now. Revenue sharing grants are on budget. Investment income, looks like we're doing really well. What happens with this is just the budget is just the general revenue fund interest. Throughout the year, all the interest we earn goes into one account, and at the end of the year, I'll allocate a bunch out to the water fund and the sewer fund and our reserve funds. So by the end of the year, that number will go down in the general revenue fund because a lot of the interest will be allocated out. So at this point, it looks like we're doing really well, but at this point, we're right around on budget. So. Building permits, it's a near record year, so a lot of construction out there, so building permits are double our revenue right now, double our budget, I mean, and planning fees, again, they're ahead as well, and you can see the rest of them are pretty close. Engineering fees, again, because of the high development year, those are ahead as well of revenue, and everything else is sort of on budget at this point in time. So the actual numbers here, so we see property taxes, which I didn't have on the previous slide. We're a little behind on the property taxes at this point in time. We have a new tax from Fortis, and that does not get paid until March for this year, until they know their actual revenues. So at the end of the year, we'll be accruing that. So by the end of the year, we should be on budget with our total tax revenues. So what else have we got in here? I think I've covered everything else in here. As you can see, we're over budget in a number of our revenues. And so in our departments here, again, blue being budget and red being actuals. You can see most of the departments, we should be at about 3/4 of the blue line, and so the anomalies here are the RCMP, where RCMP is quite slow at billing us, so the second quarter billing for them, which is our third quarter, we have not received yet, so there's only half a year's of expenses in here instead of 3/4 of a year. We still haven't received it to the state, so. Fire department, again, looks a little low at half instead of 3/4. They've got a couple large expenditures that happen later in the year, so that will bring that up. And everything else, as you can see, is looking fairly close to 3/4. Minor capital, that's a whole bunch of different projects, which I'll get to in a minute. You can see that they're quite far below budget at this point in time. So this table here is pages 85 to 88 in the agenda. And this is just a summary of the departmental totals. So council and administration, part of this comprises of administration, human resources, IT, communications, bylaw, and safety. So it's quite a number of little sub-departments within the administration area, and plus council. At this point in time, there's the admin salaries are at 86% of budget. Again, everything should be, if we're on budget, at around 75%. And the legal fees have already exceeded the annual budget. There's a couple things in HR hiring costs, training, and consulting budgets within HR are $50,000 budget and only 16% spent. So we're under in HR in those areas, and HR legal is at 92% spent. Corporate training, that budget at this point is at 53% spent, but there is more corporate training scheduled for the last quarter. And our new safety our safety program has been increased with the hiring of a safety officer, but that was delayed, and so at this point we're only 21% of the budget spent, but with the new officer on for next year, that should be on track. Long-term debt, we're only at 51%, but we make our long-term debt payments in the spring and later in the fall, so the second half of the payments are not made yet. They will be on budget by the end of the year. RCMP, again, I mentioned the third quarter billing is not received yet, so that's why their budget is so much remaining. Fire department, again, a couple items later on in the year. Building inspections and community development, building inspections is within that. Their legal fees, again, there's been some legal proceedings this year, and their legal fees at this point are 95% of the budget at the end of September. Wages are in that department are well below budget due to a manager vacancy in the department. And what else have we got on here? Facilities. There's quite a bit of budget remaining because the PCTC costs for the city's share of this building, have not been allocated out yet for the third quarter. Public Works overall, that area is on budget, as you can see, with 25% budget remaining. But within that overall budget, there's several areas that are over budget and several that are under, and at the end it averages out to be on budget. So, what else? Minor capital. So as you can see, minor capital, we've only spent 27%. We have 73% budget remaining. So minor capital, the costs incurred for 2016 being $277,000 roughly. Primarily relate to the PCCC roof replacement, that's the largest. We also have tennis court resurfacing at Springwood, speed reader boards, downtown transportation, and some software upgrades. As you can see, there's also quite a bit of work still outstanding, and that outstanding work relates to some computer servers, website redesign, our software contingency, asset management, greenhouse gas reduction strategy, community park master plan review, library carpet replacement, PC door replacement, and electric charging station, and some sidewalk upgrades, and also work adjacent to development contingency, which has not been spent and will go into surplus if it remains unspent. So, on to capital. The capital still have 70% of our budget remaining. The administration budget is primarily for a land acquisition, a bylaw vehicle, and HR management software, aerial photography for mapping. So the bylaw vehicle and the aerial photography are completed as well. Yeah, that's what's completed in that one. Fire department, fire hall equipment, they are in the budget to get a new ladder truck this year, and this first half of it, this is not the full cost of it, this is just for the chassis so that they can start building the rest of the truck. So it's a 2-year project. At this point, I think they're going out for tender on that at this point in time. And the fire department training ground, that is for the training tower that's been approved in the budget. And the contract has recently been awarded for that, so we should start seeing costs going forward on that. The parks budget is primarily for Rath River Trail development, some erosion control in the community park and Sutherland Stairs. So the Raft Trevor Trail at this point in time is on hold due to, I believe, with challenges trying to get the land for where the bridge will land on the other side of the river. And erosion control and Sutherland Stairs were held up by some other government agency approvals, and so getting the approval to do the works. And Public Works, there's a lot of projects in there. The 5 largest, I'll just quickly go over them. We have Temple Street Phase 2, which is now complete. We have Corfield Street, which we've just talked about and is just in some design stage. McKinnon Street and Banks Avenue. Banks Avenue is almost complete. McKinnon Street hasn't, I don't believe, started yet. And also the new Public Works building, which again has not had too much costs incurred. I believe it's in the design stage as well. So that's it for the capital. But before I go on to the next one, are there any questions on the general fund? Anybody have any before I move on?
Okay, questions. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when you're talking Banks Avenue, are you also including Banks Avenue to Forsyth?
Yes, that's where it is.
So, no, Forsyth. To Forsyth. Okay.
I think it ends at Forsyth, right?
Because I think that was like...
Oh, they're done together. Okay, yeah, because I think they run parallel, don't they? So where do they end at Banks at? What's the cross street? Acacia, yeah. Okay.
Mr. Butterworth, while you're going on here, when does it, I know it won't be finalized by December 31st, but when do we get the final summary of what was expended and what was in and what was over, what was under? We get that, what, February, March?
We can do that probably not much earlier than the end of February. It takes a couple months to get everything assembled for our final numbers. I could potentially do one earlier, but it would be a rough draft. But we don't go over, so there's not really, overall we will not go over. Okay, I'll move on.
Councillor Burton.
Sorry, through you, just a quick comment. Really pleased to see business licenses and development that much up. That's a good sign.
Good.
Another good sign.
Continue, Mr. Butterworth.
Okay, Water Utility Fund. This is on page 90 of the agenda. So the where I'm at here. Wrong page. Okay. So the water billings are 10% higher than last year, but as you can see, they're a little bit behind budget by 2%. I did check to try and see why that was, or why we're higher than last year, is our water consumption is up 4% for commercial over 2015 and residential 4.9% over 2015. Probably due to it was all due in the summer. There was actually decreases in the March billing and increases in the September billing of 2016 by 14% for the summer billings, and for both segments, commercial and residential, they were actually down in March this year compared to last year, but the summer made up for it. And I think that's primarily due to we had a water ban last year, and we didn't have the same water ban this year. So overall, the revenues are down just a little bit, at 2%. So operating expenditures are low at this point. There's still some allocations that have to be done, that get done at year end, relating to ERWS and AWS. That's about $111,000 that gets allocated in there, so they aren't recorded. Allocations from the administrative allocations from the general fund for cost of administration, finance department, and other departments gets allocated in there. We've only done half a year's worth. We didn't do the third quarter yet. We'll do the rest at the end of the year. So there's a few things why the operating expenditures are down. Minor capital is also low. The costs incurred in there relate to flushing maps. There's still Public Works site servicing, water study, and works adjacent to development budgets that haven't been spent. Amortization shown on there gets recorded at year end once we have all of our capital in and we can figure out what our amortization is, so it'll remain at zero till year end. And the capital for the waterworks, again, it's fairly similar, well, except that we have ERWS in here. So the majority of this is ERWS, which were delayed waiting for permits earlier in the year. The other larger projects in there is a purchase of the RDN's portion of the ERWS land, which has taken place. Temple Street, Corefield Street, and 2 new wells. So Corefield Street and the new wells do not have many costs incurred in them at this point in time. Temple Street's complete. Yeah, so that's it for the water fund. Sewer fund, again, on page 90 of the agenda. Revenues, again, a little bit behind, and again, it's similar to the water. The sewer billing is based on water usage, so if the water's behind, the sewer is going to be a little behind. Operating expenditures are only 50%. Again, that's partly because the admin charges are only charged for half the year instead of 3/4. Minor capital, nothing's been spent. The budget is for lift station upgrades, right-of-way easements, and works adjacent to development. Again, a number of those items will end up going into surplus at the end of the year if they don't get spent. Amortization, again, recorded at year end, and the capital projects, there's 5 major projects. So Banks Avenue is completed as far as the sewer goes, sanitary goes. Or actually, Banks Avenue budget, the work was not required, so there is a budget for that, which will roll over into the capital reserve at the end of the year. And Corefield Street's in the early design, and the other 3 projects haven't started. That's it for the sewer fund. So AWS, the administration and operations portion of this total operating expenditures are well within the budget. The maintenance costs are $43,000 over budget due to an unexpected generator and building replacement. Well, generator replacement, and around that they decided to fix the building, which needed some safety improvements. So the building was expanded to house the new generator, and some safety improvements were added. So it is over budget. We do have a reserve with AWS. So anything that goes over budget, we will pull out of that reserve to balance that at the end of the year. And ERWS, we talked about the capital on that, capital projects. So we spent $1.9 million to the end of September, and whatever we don't spend in this, we've included in our 2017 budget the full works of ERWS, so whatever doesn't get spent in this, normally we would carry it forward, but in this case we're not going to, because we've rebudgeted our what is needed in ERWS to complete the project. And PCCC, so this is this building. We do the accounting for this building with our partners, and so at this point in time it's on budget, the end of September. And as you can see from our DCC fees collected, we've collected 99% at this point in time. The last collection we had was in August. We haven't had a collection since, so I thought it was going to be really good by the end of the year, but at this point it seems to have slowed down. So I'm not sure if we're going to have any more between now and the end of the year or not, but at this point we have covered what we had projected for the year. Sorry. So I think I'll just skip the summary, and is there any questions or comments?
I'm going to just ask one quick question. I forget, how much is in our ERWS reserve fund?
ERWS reserve fund?
Yeah.
We don't have an ERWS reserve fund.
Pardon me?
We don't have an ERWS reserve fund.
Well, you said there was going to be something...
AWS, sorry.
Pardon me?
AWS reserve.
Oh, AWS.
Yeah.
How much is
AWS has a reserve. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's it's between 200 and 300,000. We put in 30,000 a year.
Okay.
So it's somewhere in that neighborhood.
We can't forget about AWS. Any questions for, this is we received for information, any questions for members of council for Mr. Butterworth? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor to receive? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. Nobody in opposition. All right. The next report we have is from our Director of Communications, Mrs. Tardif. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mrs. Tardif, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Thank you, Your Worship. Canada's sesquicentennial in 2017 is an important time for Canada and for Parksville. It's a chance to show pride in our country and an opportunity for residents to celebrate or party. Funds for a Canada 150 project are identified in the 2016 and 2017 budgets, and the first step is to form a community-led working group under the auspices of the city. Ideally, council will appoint a member of council to be part of this working group. The working group would meet over the next few months to research and plan a possible event and/or legacy project, which would then be brought back to council for approval. It would be then that the real work begins to plan and execute a stellar Parksville event or project for 2017. The recommendations are as per the agenda.
Thank you. So we need to appoint somebody from council. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to move that we appoint Councillor Patterson as the liaison to the working group, 150 Canada 150 working group.
Seconder? Do I have a seconder for that? You second it? Okay. Pardon me? We do have a mover. Yeah, okay. No, I was talking about the motion from
we have a motion on the floor, Your Worship, to adopt the recommendations of the staff report.
So we don't need a motion to, we need just to name somebody, is that it?
No. Once you have dealt
with
the staff report,
I see, I understand. I get it. It's been a long night. Okay, so I'm going to, the three recommendations that are in your reports.
Just for, who moved that?
We have a mover and a seconder for those. So, okay, so we'll, on those three recommendations, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, we have another. Yes, you can make your motion now.
So I'm going to make the same motion I made when I shouldn't have.
And we have a seconder for that. Can I ask a question before we start the discussion? Would it be, given that it's the 150th, and I think that all members of council, including myself, are interested, could we at least be advised of when these meetings are, so if we wanted to attend? Would that be okay, Mrs. Tardif?
If I may, Your Worship, I think that's a great idea. I can do that.
Thank you. Okay, so well, it's understood then that when these meetings are held, we could all attend. Yes, Councillor Burton.
And I think admission should be by learning how to say sesquicentennial.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. And so I would through you to the Director of Communications. So I know a lot of different communities are doing the celebrating. I know the Parksville Community Conference Center is. I know that the Chamber of Commerce is. Is there some kind of liaison between all the different organizations so we can get a better bang for the buck?
If I may, Your Worship, what I'm hoping is that there will be representatives on the working group from most organizations in the city.
Okay, so and I'm happy to hear that we can, we'll all be advised, and if we can attend, we can attend and give our 2 cents worth. Okay. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. Now, does Councillor Burton get to vote on this next one, Mrs. Keller?
No.
Yes, Councillor votes.
What happens if this is not approved?
Well, we're going to have an interesting debate. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. There's one moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Oates. Okay, Mrs. Keller, would you please give us the background on this issue? And I was just kidding about whether Councillor Burton can vote or not.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe if the motion isn't approved, then I would just have to write another report. Under the provisions of the Local Government Act, within 30 days after the declaration of the official election results, the Chief Election Officer must submit a report of the election results to Council. This report recommends the results, and recommendations are to receive the report.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. Okay. All right. Moving on to new business, and if you'll indulge the Mayor for a moment, I'm going to, I've got a number of things that I'd like to announce under new business. First of all, very important, on Wednesday night, November the 9th at 6 p.m. in this council chambers, there'll be the ongoing 2017 budget deliberations. Secondly, I'd like to report that the Parksville Fire Department annual food and toy drive takes place on Saturday and Sunday, November 19th and 20th. Firefighters will go door to door collecting for the Salvation Army. Parksville residents have always been so generous, and donations make a difference to many families, especially at this time of the year. Master Transportation Plan. The city has begun the process to finalize the Master Transportation Plan, which identifies key transportation strategies for Parksville. Information will be presented to the public on Thursday, December the 1st, from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Parksville Community and Conference Center. Public involvement is highly encouraged. Next, the Corfield and Jensen Greenway. Through a survey on the website, residents may still comment on the plans for the Corfield Street capital upgrades, as well as the preliminary proposal for improvements to a trail connecting Corfield Street to McVickers. And are we going to have another open house for the business folk on Corfield? Mrs. Comas?
It is my understanding that staff will be meeting with them directly.
Thank you. Okay, and we have the addresses from our colleague, the executive director of the PDBA. Thank you. Okay. One other issue. Last week on Thursday, I had the privilege of speaking along with the police chief and the deputy fire chief to grades 4 and grade 5 from the Noose Elementary School. It was a fascinating experience. I make no apologies. I convinced them, I hope, that municipal government is where the action is. Municipal government is where it happens. Without municipal government, Canada would be a lesser place, and municipal governments need more say, and we need more money from the federal and provincial governments. The questions that were asked were phenomenal. The class size was about 25, and I'm sure that every student asked about 5 questions apiece. And there was some very, very interesting questions, like, do you ever shoot your gun? So that was from the police chief. That was very interesting. And we're having others in the new year, and I'll let you know when that is, so, because I think that we'd all like to sit in the audience. I was fascinated by the enthusiasm, and we had a mock council, by the way, and that went very, very well. These kids are really intelligent, and they pick up real quick. So just pointed that out to you. I think the new sessions will be held early next year, and when I solidify those dates, we'll let you know. And thanks to staff, by the way. Miss Ross and Mrs. Barr were very, very helpful in working this out and setting out the exercise, which was an interesting time. So on that note, I can just see the kids going home and telling their parents the most important level of government is the municipal government. Forget about the federal and provincial. And I went back to 1867 to criticize the BNA Act for not taking into account that eventually we'd have municipalities and more people living in municipalities than we have in the rural area. That wasn't the case then. Okay, other members of council with new business. I'm going to go to Councillor Burton to start off. It's your first meeting.
I haven't been here long enough to have any new business, but I do thank you for welcoming me, and I look forward to new business soon.
Thank you. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have some new business. I would like to make a motion This is a request for a change in the use of grant and aid by the Parksville and District Musical Association. The request is that Council approve the written request from the Parksville and District Musical Association to redirect the $500 awarded to the association from the spring 2016 grants and aid budget for the youth choir to the concert band outreach project. This performs concerts for residents at Trillium Lodge and Stanhope Place. In spring 2016, councillors, myself, and Greer recommended a grant of $500 to the association for a youth choir, and that was approved on April 4th, 2016. So that is the...
So you're taking it and moving it from another, to the same group, but for another task?
Yes, so the request is to take it from the choir, rather than using it for the youth choir, to use the money for the concert band outreach project.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Oates. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Anything else, Councillor Salter?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to call attention to the fact that November 11th is coming up very soon, and there will be, as per usual, a gathering starting at the Legion and a parade that leads to the Senate House just out here. So hopefully many residents and council members will be able to take part in that. I find it always to be a very moving event. I will be there with my scouts, who are also helping with the food drive, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I won't be there. I'll be with my grandkids in another part. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, I forgot to welcome Councillor Burden to our group, and I expect that it's great that we now have a full council again. And although we're going to miss Councillor Greer, we welcome Councillor Burden. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to remind everybody that the Downtown Business Association, the Parksville Downtown Business Association, this is a busy month to them. They have, they're going to light up the tree and the Craig Street. And do you know what date that is? Yeah. November 25th. And there's also going to the Polapalooza will be around again, so make sure you go to the different businesses. And the AGM, I think, is November 10th. What day? March. Okay. It's like I just can't keep track. There's too many.
Thank you, and thank you, Executive Director Pam Bottomley. Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Worship. I have no items of new business, but I want to extend warmest welcomes to Councillor Burden. I look forward to your perspective.
Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. I echo the sentiments around the table and welcoming Mr. Burden to the table. This is a busy week for me with the Mayor being away. I get to give opening remarks and welcome to a Toastmasters group, which will be having a conference from all over the island here in Parksville, and their I'm not sure what you would call it, their fall conference, it's called, and I think it's really appropriate, is Beaches, Speeches, and Spa. So try saying that 3 times fast. On Wednesday this week, as part of my youth liaison group, one of the past students from Bolinas is coming to speak, and that's one of her studies is government, and hopefully in the future we'll have someone returning back. But it's always interesting and rewarding to hear a presentation from a student from the Parksville area who comes back to speak to the youth here. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I have been remiss. I would like to welcome Councillor Burden to this table. I know I work with you at the Chamber of Commerce, and I look forward to you working
in conclusion, I think that I believe, and I know that Councillor Burden's going to bring a different lens to this council table. We lost a lens, a certain different kind of lens when we lost Councillor Greer, but I think Councillor Burden will certainly bring a different lens to the table. And I'll say, like echoing the words of Councillor Salter, it's good to have a full group again. So welcome. And you did fairly well tonight, I must admit. Won't be so kind. We'll be watching. Everybody will be watching and waiting for you. Okay, Council, I need a mover and a seconder pursuant to Section 91K of the Community Charter. Council proceed to a closed meeting to consider an item relating to discussions regarding the provision of a municipal service. Do I have a mover in this? Councillor Oates, Councillor Patterson, all those in favor? We are going in camera. We'll take a 5-minute break. Oh, is that? I thought it was later than that.